Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. The European Commission, with Ursula von der Leyen at its head, is gearing up for a new term. They certainly have a full agenda ahead of them. From illegal migration to EU enlargement and competitiveness, the Commission has a lot to grapple with. Are we going to see a realignment of the EU's posture on these issues? What will their priorities and goals be? What are the greatest challenges that they will face? Well, to explore these and related questions, I am joined by Piotr Kaczyński. He's an EU expert at the Geremek Foundation.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Welcome back to TVP World. So, where do we start? Let's start with illegal migration into Europe. Clearly, that's been a hot button issue across the EU. A number of governments have faced challenges from their electorate as a result. How do you see von der Leyen and the Commission's role in making some kind of consensus possible here?
It's a very good and tricky question because there's a number of issues out there which are sparking big debates ahead this particular year, and migration is one of those hot potato topics. Of course, we very well know what is the situation, what is the position of Poland and the dominant position across the European Union, but it doesn't mean that it's a universally shared position. The position is that there is first a great wave of migrants coming into Europe, and many of them are crossing the border illegally. But there is a very particular situation with certain borders, in particular the Eastern European border with countries of Russia and Belarus, where the people who are crossing the border, the migrants crossing the border, are effectively instruments in the hands of the Minsk and Moscow regimes, who are attempting to destabilize the country sitting on the eastern border of the European Union and NATO, and per se the European Union and NATO at large.
Indeed. However,
there's no way to tell you right now what will be the balance or what will be the particular take, but I can only tell you what is the predominant opinion at the moment, but it is not shared by everybody across the board.
No, it isn't, but we're looking to the Commission to provide some kind of guidance. I mean, one of the areas of tension, if you like, is what to do with these migrants who have arrived on European shores illegally. Now, Italy tried to put them into processing centres, and that was said to be, it's raising questions about the migrants' human rights. Similar thing happened with the United Kingdom. I know that it's not in the EU any longer, but of course they tried a similar thing with Rwanda, and under human rights legislation, which still applies to them, they were prevented from doing this. So, caught between a rock and a hard place. You know, they're in the European Union illegally, but getting them out is a bit of a challenge, and that is something that surely the Commission cannot afford to ignore if it's going to maintain unity within the bloc.
Absolutely. And there's more challenges here. First of all, what happens with the claims that they are, a lot of people are claiming their asylum rights. And the question here, and that's the offer potentially, is that the waiting time for your application will be needed, and that waiting time you don't have to wait in a camp in Italy, say, but for example in Albania, and that is the bottom line situation here. Whether this can happen in Albania, that should be legal as long as this processed application for asylum in, let's say, Italy or elsewhere in the European Union is processed in a due course, in a proper course, because we have also seen that, for example, Greek authorities have a large, predominantly over 95% rejection rate to people who are coming from very difficult situations. We are not talking about economic migrants. We are talking of people who are escaping war situations, like in Syria or Afghanistan in recent years.
Understood.
So that is, yeah.
Understood. Although, there are many who say that, well, the human rights of the indigenous populations are being ignored in preference to the human rights of the migrants.
This is a bit populistic, because you cannot say that the presence of a person is against your human rights.
Well, it does if resources, for example, medical resources, are less available to you, and people, suffer as a result of that. But I'd like to move on to another issue, and that is EU enlargement. Now, the Western Balkans, are kind of online to join the EU. We've had the Schengen zone extended. But again, we find that there's a tension, because we have some countries within the EU, and Slovakia and Hungary come to mind, of course, who are basically not towing the line. So isn't the EU taking too much of a risk extending the number of countries within the EU when it hasn't got its own house in order yet?
Well, it's a chicken and egg question. It's like, which one do you do first? Do you consolidate on the inside, or do you enlarge the bloc? Clearly, there is a geopolitical necessity to enlarge the bloc, and the benefits of enlarging the bloc are much greater than the cost of enlarging the bloc today. And when we talk about enlarging the bloc by the end of the decade, we do not talk necessarily Ukraine. You may be thinking that Ukraine is the partner here. We talk about countries that do not raise any major objections per se. Those are the countries that find universal support for their application process. This is Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Moldova. And those four countries could go ahead without major obstructions in the room. However, for example, the Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union has been also trying to test an idea of a big bang enlargement, similar to 2004 enlargement, so that to marry the enlargement of all the, maybe all or most of the Western Balkan applicants and Ukraine and Moldova. And that could be controversial. So there you go, a little controversy on strategy. What kind of strategy will we see in the coming year and years as it comes to enlargement?
Indeed. And we will be watching that closely, of course. Now, in the last minute or so that we have left, misinformation, disinformation. Now, the EU produced some legislation to control the production of information on public platforms, but that already seems to have kind of become obsolete. If we look at the Romanian presidential elections and how they were influenced by disinformation on social media. Are they going to have to update the legislation? And where's the tension between free speech and preventing disinformation and misinformation?
Absolutely. It's like, do you have a right to say whatever you want, including lies? That's effectively the bottom line question here. And we need to realize that in today's world, there are already limitations to free speech in Europe, for example, against pedophiles. You cannot promote some illegal hate speech, for example, among any minorities. There's a number of limitations to free speech. So here we are talking about deliberate political menacing activity, and to find a balance between the two it's not an easy thing, and But I will also say here something which I said on another outlet the other day, that when it is a fight against disinformation at a large scale, like in electoral processes, like in Romania we've seen, it's not only about addressing the old tools that were used against us, but it's also about preventing the future, the new tools. We know what Russians or others have tried in Romania, in Moldova, in Georgia last year. But the question is, what will they try in places that are different, of course, Czechia, Poland, Germany, more imminent, and other places. So there are different societies, different responses, and different instruments. But one and the most important tool always is civic education of all, not only of youth, but of all, including adults. And we've been missing that largely in Europe, to educate the adult people about disinformation and misinformation. That has been our weak point.
Understood. Well, we look forward to seeing how the EU Commission handles all of these and many more issues. I wish we'd had more time, Mr. Kaczyński. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our audience. Have a good day, sir.
Have a good day, too.
Thank you. And that's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Goodbye for now.